All right. Well, hey, you know what? The thought occurred to me because I just happened to get a video call from my friend Kevin Howard and colleague Kevin Howard on this righteous grind to the Clean New Deal. And he said he hadn't seen a truth bomb from me in a couple of days. So he wanted his fix. And I figured, hey, let's record our conversation and make that the truth bomb. So it is Thursday, February 1st, 2024, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, obviously 10 a.m. Pacific time. And good morning to you, my brother. Yeah, a lot of things are coming at us fast and furious. And for this truth bomb riff, dude, I'll just lay up what I was going to do had we not segued into this particular conversation. But I'd like to interact with you because it would be a good, sort of exercise for the audience to interplay with this. So, justifiably, yesterday, for example, and this was kind of heard across the cacophony of mainstream media in what we all call the echo chamber. But there was a horrific and a tragic incident, a murder, an Al Qaeda like murder, an ISIS like murder, a Hamas like murder. Actually, let's go to ISIS because in Al Qaeda, because this is what Al Qaeda and ISIS were definitely finding, particularly right after the right after 9/11 and everything that was happening in Iraq. Um, a white MAGA extremist who's 33 years old murdered his father, cut his head off, and then displayed it on YouTube and said this is what should happen to all federal employees and supporters of Biden and that sort of thing. And so the reaction from mainstream, obviously, it's horrific. It's not something that we would see very often in the United States, although we have our fair share of insane violence. But that's definitely something, a unique spin on things that have been going on for some time. And I'll kind of zero in on Lawrence O'Donnell. Lawrence O'Donnell, who I watch frequently because he does have, in my opinion, and I'm extremely critical of all of mainstream media, but Lawrence O'Donnell, when he's focusing in the right place, particularly with Harvard professor emeritus Lawrence Tribe, I really respect their unpacking of the law, of how things work in context to Trump and all things Trump. And but I'm also very cynical and jaded towards Lawrence, as I am most people on MSNBC, because I find them as just a scripted version and an alternative to Fox. And the credibility for Biden, for example, in context to all of these different things, was that MAGA has gone off the rails crazy train. That the context of what we've seen from, in fact, he did kind of a Patrick Global truth bomb riff in a sense where he connected the dots between this horrendous murder in Pennsylvania yesterday, this 33-year-old kid on the far lunatic fringe, but he connected it. He said the only other people that get away with this and get paid for it are Fox News contributors. And so he starts to untangle all of the things that are going on with Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift in terms of it being from the right's perspective, a deep state sort of psyops, to control the election, and that they fixed and rigged the Super Bowl, and Vivek Ramaswamy was encapsulated in this sort of thing. And I've seen it all over the place. And I just happened to do a truth bomb riff the other day that did very well compared to a lot of my truth bombs and connected with a lot of the Taylor Swift crowd, which was great. And I saw a big increase in my subscribers, which I'm trying to get the message up. And what I'm trying to get out is this incredibly important message. So as Lawrence O'Donnell is going to lambast and ridicule and mock really people that are insane, maybe they've got mental problems, maybe they're drug addicts, maybe there's something different, maybe they've been indoctrinated. There's all sorts of psychological stuff that happens in this world. But in his unpacking of the events, he makes as a catch-all that conspiracy is what's going to drive the madness, or conspiracy theory. And so what I just leveled out on X, and what I'll continue in this conversation, is what is the difference, Kevin, between conspiracy and organization?
Well, the difference between conspiracy, I mean, to me, there's no need to be literal about this. Let's just talk about how it's used. Those two
Let me
words
just make this point first, and then I'm going to let you just riff for a while because I want you to answer all this stuff. But but just what is the difference? Okay, I'll insert the difference. I don't need to be
Yeah.
rhetorical.
Yeah.
They're both an organization. Okay,
Yeah.
a conspiracy requires an organization.
Yeah.
Organizations require organization. However, if you insert the word criminal and you can actually prove it, then it's a conspiracy. It goes from theoretical to actual literal. Now, what we've seen constantly in the mainstream press, and what I've been trying to get all of MAGA's attention that aren't the extreme right, that's going to be in the Proud Boys or the Brown Shirts or whatever, white nationalist organization, people that might be white working class that are fed up with the system that sold them down the road, like George Carlin said, like 50 years ago, because of a neoliberal establishment and globalism and all of the rest of it, that are like, well, those guys aren't fighting for me. When you have this civil war and this fracturing and these silos and all of these things that we've seen for the last 20 years, what I've done in my work and what I knew the whole time is that, okay, of course, there is criminal organizations, and that's why we have remedies, particularly the racketeering statutes, organized racketeering influence corrupt organization, which is a conspiracy. It's a criminal conspiracy. It's a criminal organization. In most cases, we think of it as the mob. So the mainstream, particularly Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow and the rest of them, every single night on the MSNBC stage, and to a lesser degree because of them trying to play the middle ground, which is CNN, but we know where Fox lands on all of this. But they are revealing Trump conspiracies every day and Trump racketeering every day in every single case. I mean, take what we're looking at in the civil fraud case that's about to, I think, any moment now reveal what is going to be the compensatory damages and whether or not it's a corporate death sentence for the Trump organization because it's conspiracy through fraud. Now, they didn't prove racketeering, and there was a reason for that. And we did a bunch of truth bombs and interviews with William K. Black that laid out why Letitia James chose to do that. And there's a reason when you're a attorney general of a state versus the attorney general of the United States in terms of resources and what you can do collectively and why you would choose civil versus racketeering, or excuse me, criminal. But by the way, just for everybody paying attention to that case, it was Elena Haba that marked the wrong box that didn't get a jury trial. So it was Trump's attorney that was responsible for him not getting a jury trial in that particular instance. However, going back to the criminal organization and everything else, what we see all the time, and now Fani Willis in Georgia is in trouble because she's got a conspiracy relationship with her investigator that they might have been in a sexual whatever that could get this whole thing thrown out. But what Fani Willis was investigating and bringing a case on was racketeering, based on what Rachel Maddow's team apparently was first to the public with, which was to reveal the criminal conspiracy of the electoral scheme where different electors fraudulently signed documents to basically steal the election, which of course is Fani Willis's case. That includes everything from, surprise, surprise, Rudolph Giuliani, who was the guy responsible for racketeering, all the way through all the elector certifications and so forth. So all of these different variables and all of these different cases come back to what I've been trying to tell MAGA the whole time, that the United States government, and of course its vestiges and media that are pro Biden, which are obviously mocking and ridiculing conspiracy, are proving conspiracy. What they're proving is Donald Trump, this is their case. Donald Trump defrauded the United States using racketeering and all of the different elements of documentation fraud, and then ultimately the racketeering with attorneys that are lying and judges that are lying. What I've done in our work, The Con, is reveal how that happened to tens of millions of people that led to tens of trillions of dollars illegally being backdoored, maneuvered from the central bank of the United States, which is the full faith and credit of the United States as a lender of last resort capacity through Federal Reserve Act Statute 13.3, which states in its actual statutes that you do not loan this sort of emergency liquidity to bankrupted, insolvent financial institutions that got that way through racketeering. and fraud. So my full point, full circle, is what we're going to see on display is ridiculing and mocking the right wing extremists that are talking about these insane things and doing these insane acts. And it is understandable to have that. But America, you have to understand that the difference is organization, conspiracy, insert criminal to organization, and there you get what you get. And my final point on this, and then I'm just going to let you run, brother. When you look at Donald Trump's run, what you're looking at is a campaign that is of, for, and by Donald Trump to take and exploit everything he can, enmeshed with a alignment with evangelicals to stack the Supreme Court, to create this sort of conservative sort of fantasy land, right? That drowns out the so-called woke culture and everything that goes with it. Okay, so that's that side of the fence. When you go with Biden, you've got an administration of, for, and by BlackRock. And oh yeah, by the way, BlackRock was the ultimate conspirator in the aftermath of the 2009 great financial crisis, when then former Secretary of the Treasury Timothy Geithner appointed BlackRock, a company that few had heard of at that time. Everybody in finance knew about them because of Larry Fink and Aladdin and what they did with the Resolution Trust back in the S&Ls and those things that they were involved with Blackstone and the Blackstone Group, but they were heavily involved with mortgage-backed securities. And so when the government needed to clean up this business, they appointed Larry Fink and BlackRock to be the administrator of the tens of trillions of dollars that the Federal Reserve unleashed illegally behind the scenes, that I continue to try to bring everybody's attention to, which was the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history that has controlled our government to be able to provide tens of trillions of dollars to this much of the population, that ultimately made the rest of the population absolutely insane. What do you have to say about all that, brother?
It's, well, the details are great. The problem is I really think, to most of the people who are listening, to most of the people you're talking to, who you're trying to get to, this is a part of the white noise. And why? It is the detail. It is the detail, but there is a lot of detail out here. So, Patrick, you and I know, because of the 13 years plus that you've put into this and the millions of dollars that you've invested, you have found the truth about what is plaguing the American people, how their lives have been impacted. You know, what is obscuring the truth that you have found is a cacophony of narratives. And your task is to get the American public, to get the broad American public to recognize that the narratives are the lie. The problem with tagging any source that is spinning a narrative, whether that is Fox News, whether that is Donald Trump, whether that is Joe Biden, whether that is MSNBC or CNN, to me, does not move the needle of 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 showing that is a part of why you can't see the truth, why they can't see the truth. Our focus needs to, because what it does is it puts us into the argument. So if you've just spent some time, and you've done this over a period of time, substantively showing the fallacy of the Trump narrative. Okay. And I've spent much shorter period of time in our discussion saying the folly in doing that. Not because what you're saying is not true, right? But because of what that narrative means to people who support Trump. And what I'm saying to you here is, whether you're advocating for any one of these false narratives, they're all framed to absorb our attention and get us to fight against each other. The narrative is the problem.
To fight each other to hide what?
Oh, to hide the massive conspiracy, the massive systemic fraud and corruption that has taken trillions, over $70 trillion since the Great Recession. but certainly have prior to the Great Recession is involved with transferring $50 trillion, right, from the working class and the middle class to the top 1%. And then on top of that $50 trillion, $70 trillion of literally looting the Federal Reserve and the Treasury. So that is the truth.
But let me
We
just,
need
I don't want to interrupt you though, but this is the key component here because if people listening to this understand what Kevin just said, the irony is that we have a massive technological structure that is amping the conversations that you're saying we don't do ourselves any service to get involved with because it takes away from our narrative. However, you can't get attention without it. So that's the irony. But to the people, hold on a second, and then I'm going to finish with this because I know I bogarted the time. But the point is, people need to understand that this isn't a democracy. And I argue, and we can argue about this a little bit further in this conversation, but it's not appropriate at the moment. But we're not a capitalist country either. We're full on, it's tyranny. It's some amalgamation of oligarchy, of aristocracy. But all it is our financial system that has complete control of the money, and the money is the blood flow of the economy. And I'm not suggesting we don't need finance. I'm not suggesting we don't need business. I'm suggesting we don't need hands in the money, all of the money in the hands of a few that pervert the whole system through all sorts of schemes of deception of three-card Montes on a three-dimensional chessboard that's the devil's chessboard, to have complete control. They're just laughing at everybody else. So yes, everybody's going like this, but meanwhile, the guys that have centrifugal force, they're in the shadows, but they're also in front of your face. People, look at Jamie Dimon. He's the most powerful central banker in the United States and the world. He's at the head of the table. He's one of many that you see every day on CNBC that go out there and they spin yarn and they do this or that. They could come from private equity. They could come from asset management. They could come from hedge funds. They could come from the too big to fail banks. That consortium is the in between from the central bank of the United States, of, by, and for the people central bank of the United States that does not work for the government of the United States. Neither does the government of the United States work for the people. They work for the money that has complete control, and everything else is insanity.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And my contention is this, again, never been a substantive critique of what you're doing. People are suffering. When we're talking about tens of millions of Americans, which, 150 million Americans, right, have been getting the shaft for 30 years, right? And they know it. They know whether you are a business owner, a small business owner, entrepreneur trying to make things happen. You remember when it was easier to make things happen, where your talent and your innovation, right, was less impeded. Progressively, it has gotten harder. How to get money, how to get investors, how to compete, the whole 9 yards. Now, the explanations, we've been given a ton of explanations for why that is. All those explanations are designed to create a fight. No one solves that problem. And the trend line is it only gets worse. My point is, and our point is, that is the narratives. Once you realize, like in the Truman Show, that people are telling you a story, the people you trust are telling you a story, right? And so what I want to emphasize in this conversation is all of them in the establishment are doing it. Our national contempt for the political establishment, both Democrats and Republicans, is well earned. There is no question. All the way back, I mean, we're talking the Godfathers, all the way back to Reagan. There is no question that if you look at the key constituents who elected each one of the presidents from Reagan on, right? And you look at the lingering effects of the policies that president did, they betrayed the very people who elected them. This is accumulated into this contempt for the establishment. And so the test is not to say how bad, to make the lesser of the two evils argument, which you're not making, right? Not to criticize one set of bums, as if the other set of bums are not just as bad, right? But to recognize they're all bums. And that if you look at the people who represent you in government and you think about all the issues that are important to you that affect your life, it's a simple test. If they are not helping you, if they're not serving you, right, that's the problem. No matter whether they have an R or an L, I mean a D, right? It doesn't matter, right? They are part of the problem. Both sides are in this thing, right? And so what I'm saying, what we've been saying is that you need to educate yourself beyond the narratives of what is true. And a great starting point is to go take some time and watch The Con, www.thecon.tv. Five-part documentary series, an hour each, lays out the facts of one example of how they are robbing us blind. Once you start informing yourself of what the actual truth is and who is actually benefiting from the fact that you have been pitted against me and I have been pitted against you and they have been pitted against us and stuff like that. Once you see who benefits from this food fight, right, you will set down the plates and join arms with all the people who have been screwed and take our sovereignty back, right? Okay, that is what the truth bombs have been all about. And but the fight has been so embedded that it's hard not to engage, right? But we need to pull back from the fight so that we can see who is robbing us blind.
So to
And
that point, though, real quick, and again, I apologize, but this is a great
no,
opportunity
that's
to
right.
say this. So over the course of the last 10 days or so, and I'm going to continue doing this, I've been, I have a network of a lot of incredibly valuable, important, brilliant people that aren't being heard. And what I
Right.
tried to do was I was like, all right, fine. I'm going to try to put these into my truth bombs. I mean, a while back, because I know what the difference is, because I am a producer of a professional podcast, and everything else, that it requires budget to do the right things and have video. And I mean, you know, what people are kind of used to seeing. And by the way, they can be easily manipulated when they see something, for example, and I see this all the time, specifically both in mainstream, which is heavily funded by corporate America, which has millions of dollars of budgets to make a clean, brilliant presentation of good-looking, articulate, smart people to tell you the narrative that they want to tell you. Same with people on the right. You see it all the time. You see people with a lot of budget, a lot of technology and the algorithms and the way they plan stuff. And some people might want to do a shortcut to what they call troll farms and yada, yada, yada. All that's embedded in this. So all I did was like, look, man, I got to get the people and their truth. And what I try to do, to your point, because my philosophy, not philosophy, my awareness of reality for the last 10 years at least, going back to Occupy Wall Street 2011, so we're talking about 13 years. So it's everybody's in silos. And so what I try to do was, okay, let's say you're a white working class MAGA supporter, senior retiree, you need to understand what's happened to American pensions in this country. So I brought Ed Seidel, the leading attorney that's brought out whistleblowers to basically reveal that Wall Street has been literally looting pensions and destroying pensions and referring to pensioners as dumb money for decades. And they literally just steal and rape you blind. Okay. That makes up a big constituent of people that skewed to obviously to Trump after, you know, Hillary and all the rest of it. Then I went and I got a woman by the name of June Carbone, who's this genius researcher, came out of Stanford and Yale, and she knows the law inside and out. And her colleagues put together this amazing revelation of what corporate America has been doing to female employees and how they do it and what the techniques are to exploit them for decades. So that's part of it. So you've got pensioners, white working class, women, and then we ended up with I did another one. Um, well, I always do that encompasses everybody else. But anyway, you get the point. Where it's just like we've got to get out of our silos. And if anybody wants to see the forest for the trees, I highly recommend going to my Truth Bombs at Patrick Global Truth Bombs, the con, and watch these and understand what is actually happening to us from people that are the ultimate experts in the field that you will never see on Sean Hannity. You will never see on Rachel Maddow. You will never see on Lawrence O'Donnell. You will never see on Anderson Cooper. Why? Because they got to make sure that we, the people, do not understand what's going on. And then that brings up the question of media. Who are they working for and why? Okay. So I'll leave it at that and you keep going because I think you're on a tear and I love what you're having to say about seeing what is actually happening to all of us, which is going to unite us.
So exactly. So we're in 2024. The we, the American public is ready for an alternative. 70% of the American public want an alternative to the choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. That's not an indictment on both of them. Some don't want Joe Biden. Some don't want Donald Trump. When you add that group together, that's 70% of the American public who does not want a matchup of Donald Trump or Joe Biden, right? And what I'm saying to you here is we have it within our power to elect an alternative if we organize, if we come together. Now, yes, we need a unifying program, right? And so the idea of the Clean New Deal as a unifying program is that we're going to do two things. First, we are going to hold accountable the people who have robbed us. They, they own the courts, but they can't own the courts if we bring the presidency with us. Okay. And so what I'm saying, so first, we need to hold accountable the people who have created this systemic corruption and fraud, which we all see. I mean, everyone from the Federal Reserve to the Supreme Court to the politicians who have the highest return on investments than the smartest people on Wall Street. They're all in on getting bribes and everything else. We all see it. We need to hold them accountable. The other thing is we need to reestablish America's commitment to us, to rebuilding the American middle class, right? We had a New Deal back in the 30s that created the greatest period of broad-based prosperity in American history, 1950 to 1980. We could do that again, 21st century stuff. Now, what if you're a libertarian, if you are a green, if you are an independent, if you are, I mean, these two principles should appeal to you. We're not talking about, anything that is controversial. We're talking about fixing our country to where our government serves us, right? The broad American public, okay? And we can unify it. So here we are, 2024. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have closed those contests are essentially over, but we're going to have contests all the way through June, right? So while they are playing that game, setting up a choice that 70% of us don't want, right? We need to be looking at every credible independent who's out there and encourage more credible people that we trust, that we respect to come out there. And then once we use the same period of time while the Democrats and the Republicans are finishing up their contests, right? To see what's the best ticket, independent of those choices that we don't want, can we put together? And then we need to encourage those parties and those independents to come together this summer. While the Republicans are doing their coronation convention and the Democrats are doing their coronation convention, we should get together and decide who amongst these independents, who amongst these third parties can be our flag bearer, can be our dream team preferred choice, to go into the general election, all behind the unifying principle of the Clean New Deal. Two simple programs that will transform this country and make sure it serves the broad American people again. We can actually do that. And if we do that, if we elect an independent, someone outside of the Democratic Party, someone outside of the Republican Party, to the only national election in American democracy, right? It will send a death blow to both establishment parties that you are next. Okay, you know, and this is the way to do it. But as long as we play the lesser of two evils game, or I hate that one so much that I'll sell my soul to elect this one, right? They laugh at us. They doesn't change anything. They know they just go back and forth because they both serve the same master, extreme wealth. Right? Okay,
Which
so
is
this is
tyranny, which is the whole point. So
yes.
let me kind
Go
of
right ahead,
backfill
Pat.
some things
Put
that
the
I think
circle on it.
that because I absolutely am so proud to be walking with you on this journey. There are a few things that I want to say this conversation I think is important for those out there who listen to this and hopefully join us and share this and subscribe and get on board. And you can ask me questions. You can reach out to Kevin. You can reach out to our colleagues, Roseanne or Paris or Dan or whomever we have in the mix. But the bottom line is that you need to understand my come from, our come from. Corruption burns and fuels fascism. This isn't the first time in history this has happened. By the way, this was going on right before, during the Great Depression, that gave us ultimately FDR, that gave us the New Deal, that gave us, everything that would ultimately be influenced and led into everything that, came during World War II and beyond. Most notably, quite frankly, Keynesian economics. And the reason that's important, I'll get into in a moment. But look, right now, as the presidential candidate stand from where I'm sitting, and we can debate this later, Kevin, and we can talk about it later, but I'm just going to make this blanket statement first. There's not one presidential candidate that exists that understands what we're talking.
That's
They do not understand the systemic corruption. They don't understand the details. And to some degree, they're a part of it. I'm not going to name names at this moment, but
yep.
that's another case. There is not a legitimate presidential candidate at the moment that has the power to break the bonds, the bonds of tyranny that this system that Kevin just referred to is the great wealth, but it's the financial system that cooks this all up for themselves. I mean, really, the financial system exists to serve billionaires, and that's not just because they're billionaires in their personality. It's the actual methodology of lending against assets by propping up assets. And when you consider the Federal Reserve's entirety of being is to supposedly maintain low inflation and high employment, but really what it's all about is to maintain the assets of the wealthy, of stocks and real estate. If that goes that direction, that's what the end game is, and that's what's maintained by the system that we're revealing to you. But within the context of the Clean New Deal, and it's really simple, guys, we have to bring the investigation at a congressional level that can hold these people to account using our system to do it. Now, if you're like me, you're probably very jaded and cynical and say, well, wait a second, Patrick. I've heard you say, and I agree with you, that the Supreme Court is corrupt to its eyeballs. Yeah, it is. In Congress is corrupt to its eyeballs. Yeah, it is. So how in the world are you going to do that without a massive tidal wave to purge both of those? Well, you got to have a president to be able to use the bully pulpit to initiate it, enforce it, and use, his, because it is the only national election for one particular figure. Everything else is broken up into all sorts of regional and, state sort of elections and that sort of thing. But the presidential election can speak for all of us. But most importantly, if that presidential candidate is equipped with the facts of what we bring you, and the con. Now I'm going to revert really quickly back to the New Deal. So most people don't know their American history. I didn't. I wasn't taught this until I had to go down the road to make the con, and I had to relearn everything. I literally had to reconfigure my brain at the age of 40, starting at the age of 40, after I'd already been through college, after I already worked forever, after I'd been through the system to understand what it is that I'm trying to reveal to you. And what I found on this journey was that there was a American hero that I hope the entire world eventually understands and knows his name. His name was Ferdinand Pecora. He was an Italian immigrant. He was a pull your boots self up by your bootstraps kind of guy, big Sicilian family, and he worked his way through the waspish legal sort of reality in Manhattan, getting in the system, going to law school, but he was an expert, as it turns out, in the mafia. He understood the mob. Get it? Sicilia, the mafia, and then he was involved with at that time, which was called Tammany Hall. And so he understand political corruption. He could just snuff it out like there was no tomorrow. He was a prosecutor in Manhattan. When history called, he answered. They put him in a position to investigate what created the Great Depression. And without a lot of resources or technology, he figured it out. And he figured out that a lot of these things were front running, which were hedge fund type stuff, which were derivatives trading, which were all of these semantics of these games that we revealed to you in the con that came full circle in literally the 2000s, because we got rid of the lessons that we learned from Pecora that gave us what we called Glass-Steagall, which was the law to separate commercial banking from investment banking, which basically got rid of casino capitalism or vulture capitalism or crony capitalism or just straight up monopoly capitalism, which is theft by deception, okay? Especially if you've got the power. So he broke that up, and that's what was called Glass-Steagall. So first and foremost, we need a Glass-Steagall now. If you want to understand more about that, I just did this incredible interview with Art Wilmart that's on Patrick Global Truth Bombs the Con. I think it says America. Well, I have Elon Musk as the picture, because in that conversation it revealed, by the way, that Elon Musk. It occurred to me, I never thought about this because I've been a fan of Elon Musk for a long time, and then I got weird because of X and everything that's happened since. But it never occurred to me that, oh my God, with all this paranoia of central bank digital currency, particularly on the right, that they can't own us and they can't understand everything that we're doing and yada yada yada. It turns out that that's who Elon Musk is. He started off with PayPal and Venmo, and now he's got all of the information that we give him on X, and he's moving into this next level where everything is going to be an economy through X. And I mean, that is exactly central bank digital currency. Oh yeah, by the way, he got to be twice his stature of. I mean, he blew up. I mean, I guess as it turns out, he's not the world's richest guy as yesterday, because of what they did in Delaware, which is hilarious in terms of his compensation. But that's not the conversation I want to have. He got billions, or he doubled his wealth during COVID because of what the Federal Reserve did. That's part and parcel to this conversation. So going back to what I was saying with Glass-Steagall. Now, the other side of that is that when you are able to do the investigation with the president, equipped with all the facts that you can find at www.thecon.tv, and also on the new Untouchables, which is another podcast that you can do a Google search on, which reveals exactly what the chairman of the Federal Reserve did and knew that nobody in the world revealed. And by the way, the entirety of media, if we had a real media, just like during Watergate, would have been all over this. They would have been everywhere inside the Fed. They would have known exactly what they were doing, but they all stood down. Somebody got the message to someone that if we weren't going to allow the Fed to do what they did unencumbered, that the entire system was going to collapse. That's what they did. They played ball. They did it during the Obama administration, and he was the cleanup guy. And the guy that was the ultimate cleanup guy was Eric Holder, his former attorney general at the Department of Justice, which made everything that's come since inevitable. Okay, so we've got to do a modern day Pecora-like hearing, because we've already got the evidence. We already know all the people who've got the answers. We've already got all the answers. It just needs to be seen and heard in Congress, because a president that we get elected forces the issue to reveal all of these things that we're trying to get you to understand. That's first and foremost. But the second part of the Clean New Deal, guys, and Kevin and I share a lot of the same, let's say, prioritization of the crises. The climate crisis, unknown to Vivek Ramaswamy, because he's a Coke lackey, because he's getting paid by a lot of those guys, whatever, I could go into all the funding mechanisms. But the climate problem is existential, and it's going to destroy us. We're destroying ourselves, because another sidebar of this is that the global reserve currency, the dollar, is predicated mostly on the commoditization of oil, which is run through none other than the swing producer of Saudi Arabia. And oh yeah, 9/11 is a little weird, going back to conspiracy theory and everything that we.
It goes deeper and deeper, but yeah.
Right. I'll just give you this piece, because we know the CIA and the FBI knew exactly where the cells were. They knew exactly how they were training, and they weren't talking to each other, because the hierarchy, particularly of Dick Cheney, the original, Darth Vader. I call him Darth Vader 1.0. Darth Vader 2.0 is none other than the CEO of BlackRock, right? So the shit never ends, right? And going back to finalize my point, we've spent $70 trillion to this small group of the financial barons that control the system, that are above the law, that run the courts, that bought the Supreme Court, that bought Congress, that bought media, so that they, and this is really the baseline, billionaires spend billions to loot trillions. That's the world we have been in for the last 15 years, okay? If you want your democracy back, if you want a country of, by, and for the people, if you want a country that Abraham Lincoln shall not perish from this earth, for, of, by, and for the people, then you have to join us. You have to create the 70% of the United States populace. So let's do the math. If we're 300 and let's say 30 million people, how many people? We're looking at north of 80 million people, right?
Way north. Oh my gosh, yes, we're talking about 100. That's like 180 million.
Well, sure, but I'm saying
Yeah,
just to get to
yeah. Take the kids out.
I
Yeah,
asked the third and so forth, but somewhere between 80 to 180 million people need to join us with the facts to break the bonds, the grips of bondage, the grips of slavery. They own us. They own us through the methodology of lies and the psychology of deception and the buy-in and the smoke and mirrors and the gaslighting and the rest, because you do not understand the facts. And if you understood that they got 70 trillion in the last 13 years, my suggestion is that that's a starting point. We should have $70 trillion managed by the United States government to A, get rid of corruption. Could you imagine if we had a real budget at the, we know all the right people who could helm at the DOJ that have spent decades doing the right thing of, by, and for the people, that could do it again if they had the power, but they don't because we're that corrupt. If we could put them into positions of power to hold these bad guys account, we budget $70 trillion over the next, I don't know, 25 years to recreate the infrastructure of the United States so that we're not dependent on fossil fuels, so that we can move into the next millennium to where we can create a dynamism and we can figure out all of these problems that it seems to me are the end of the line. And that is the clean new deal. And I wish I could say it in 2 seconds and 2 sentences without having run-on sentences go all over the place in a stream of consciousness. I wish it were so simple that a blind man can see it. But from where I'm sitting, it is. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. And when you have the truth, you're bulletproof. Go ahead, close us out, brother.
Oh, Patrick, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. But absolutely, the takeaway is what we need in this moment is this era's Abraham Lincoln. And the irony of that statement, Patrick, that you had made is the last time that the American public said, you know what, these two parties are not working for us, was 1860. This is the birth of the Republican Party, because it was the Democrats and the Whigs going into 1860. We can do this. Remember, it was the American people, the colonials, who said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. We can do this. And they challenged the most powerful country in the world to get their independence. We can take back our sovereignty, reclaim our government, and reinvest in our people if we can come together. So I thank everyone who's listening. Tell your friends, come to join us. We're asking for $13 in the contributions. That symbolizes the original 13 colonies. Put that together with tens of millions of people, and now we can finance and a campaign where we can barnstorm across this country and we can be heard once and for all.
And
Thank
to the
you.
Swifties out there, I love how you said that, Kevin, because the 13, like Taylor Swift, 13 is a big number in my life. But really, the simple part of it is that there were original 13 colonies that challenged the biggest, most impossible to defeat empire at their time period, and they did it. But what did they do? They created separation of powers because they didn't trust power. And then they created the Bill of Rights, and they created the Constitution.
A written constitution, the first written constitution.
Right. And I love being here with my brother, who I don't see color at all, but I may as well state the obvious. Here's a guy who could be very, very cynical and jaded towards the three-fifths clause and all of the flaws of the founding fathers. And there was a big fight to do about that at the very
Sure.
beginning. And yeah, slavery was a huge part of it. And we eventually broke the grips of bondage only to allow Jim Crow to escape. I mean, yes, it's never been a perfect deal. We're not perfect. Nobody is perfect, guys, but ridiculous is ridiculous. We know what to do. We can fly airplanes. I mean, my God, we can build ginormous aircraft carriers. We can send people into outer space. We can land. There's nothing we can't do if we put our minds to it. And as another level, that's an extended family member of mine, and my last name is Level. Guys, failure is not an option of Apollo 13, right? So $13, if we get 10, 13 million people, we're up to 160 million, 169 million. That's enough to really put the metal down to change the entire paradigm. Guys, you've never seen a more Orwellian movie, script, novel than what is going on right in
Right
front of
now.
your eyes. And we know there are tens of millions out there that get this. We have to unify. We have to come out of our silos, because this, my friends, is the righteous grind for truth and justice, liberty and justice for all. I guess that's enough platitudes for me today. Hey, man, Kevin, thank you so much. I look forward to next, and all the best to everybody out there. Please spread the word. We're coming. Oh, I did want to finish one last thing because this is important. I do want to get your thought on this. So, again, with the conspiracy theory and all of this bullshit with the right, and like, I know sports, and there's a lot of complicated stuff that happens in the NFL, but there's no way you can fix to have two teams meet in the Super Bowl, or who that winner of the Super Bowl. I mean, there is a way, but very unlikely in terms of refs and that sort of thing. But the right has been saying, oh yeah, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and everything else. So they discount in the end. Everybody who's knows this is like, these guys are nuts. But again, what we're talking about, buddy, what we're talking about is control fraud. We're talking about guys at CEO levels, through perverse incentives, can control the entire system for an outcome that creates what we're in the midst of. Do you have any final words on that?
No, you said it all right there, Patrick. I think this is perfect. Thanks
All
so
right,
much for the
man. Guys, let's
opportunity to
hope
talk
this
today.
gets spread like wildfire. All the best to you. Liberty and justice for all, my friends. Onwards and upwards.